Sometimes, the people we trust the most are the very ones who pull us into the mess we never asked for. Tonight's story is about a friendship that began with loyalty, laughter, and years of trust, until it turned into manipulation, gossip, and betrayal. Stay with me as we dive into how a best friend's so-called help became a web of drama that changed everything. You never thought twice about calling her your best friend. From high school study sessions to late-night calls in college, she was the one constant thread weaving through your life. You knew her laugh, her moods, her quirks, the way she needed coffee before speaking in the morning, the way she always tapped her pen when she was nervous, the way she could brighten a room with a story that made everyone lean in. Through breakups, family arguments, and endless small victories, she was there. When your first serious relationship fell apart, she sat on your floor with a pint of ice cream, listening as you repeated the same sentences over and over until the words lost meaning. When she didn't get into the graduate program she wanted, you stayed up with her until sunrise, making lists of all the reasons why it wasn't the end of the world. You had both promised, silently and aloud, that you would always be on each other's side. There's a certain comfort that comes from a friendship that deep. It makes you believe there are no secrets, no surprises left, just two people who know each other inside out. You trusted her with everything, your fears, your hopes, your embarrassing stories you'd never tell anyone else. And in return, she entrusted you with hers. Because of that history, you never imagined she could drag you into something you didn't want. You assumed she always had your back, always knew where your lines were. Boundaries felt like something other people needed. With her, it was different. Or at least, that's what you believed. It started small, the way so many things do. Offhand comments about how you should put yourself out there more. Jokes about how long it had been since you'd dated anyone seriously. At first, you brushed them off. This was the kind of teasing you'd exchanged for years. But lately, there was a sharper edge to it. A weight in her voice that suggested she wasn't just joking. You remember the first time you caught her exchanging a knowing glance with another friend while you were telling a story. You didn't think much of it in the moment, but later, lying in bed, the memory replayed in your head. Something about that look unsettled you, as if conversations were happening about you when you weren't around. Still, you shrugged it off. She was your best friend after all. If there was more to it, she'd tell you, wouldn't she? You had no idea then how quickly the ground beneath your friendship was about to shift, or how deeply you'd question the very trust that had defined it. The shift came on a Thursday evening, so ordinary you almost missed the moment it all began. You'd just gotten off work, exhausted but relieved to have a quiet night ahead, when your phone buzzed with a message from her. "Wear something nice. We're going out tonight." At first you thought it was harmless. Just another night at a restaurant or bar, the two of you catching up the way you always had. But when you arrived, she was already waiting outside, dressed up more than usual, her grin a little too wide. "You look great," she said, looping her arm through yours before you could even ask what the plan was. It wasn't until you walked into the crowded lounge that you noticed the extra seat at the table, already occupied. A stranger, someone you didn't recognize, looked up at you with a nervous smile. Your best friend's voice rang out, far too cheerful. "This is Chris. You two are going to love each other." Your stomach dropped. You hadn't agreed to this. You hadn't even known it was happening. And yet, there you were, face to face, with a setup you hadn't asked for. She slid into the booth with the ease of someone who thought she had done you a favor, her eyes sparkling as though she'd just delivered the perfect surprise. You sat stiffly, glancing at the stranger across from you, trying to mask your discomfort with polite small talk. Chris seemed kind enough, but that wasn't the point. The point was that your best friend had orchestrated this without a word, as though your choices were hers to make. Throughout the evening, she kept nudging the conversation, steering it toward you, laughing a little too loudly at your jokes, tossing in comments like, "See? Don't they have great chemistry?" You felt like a character in a play you hadn't auditioned for, trapped on a stage you didn't want to be on. Part of you wanted to pull her aside and demand to know what she was thinking. But the other part, the part that didn't want to make a scene, didn't want to embarrass anyone, stayed quiet. You smiled when expected, answered questions politely, and counted down the minutes until the check arrived. When the night finally ended, you thought you'd at least get an apology, or maybe even an explanation. Instead, she hugged you tightly and whispered, "Trust me, this is just the beginning. You'll thank me later." You smiled weakly, but inside, unease coiled tighter in your chest. She thought she was helping, but to you, it felt like the first crack in the foundation of your friendship, a shift you couldn't quite name, but one you knew you wouldn't forget. Over the next few weeks, her little project became impossible to ignore. What you had hoped was a one-time setup morphed into something more persistent, a campaign disguised as care. She texted you constantly about Chris. Did you two text yet? Or, you should invite him to that movie you wanted to see. She sprinkled hints into conversations with your other friends, as though she were narrating your love life for an invisible audience. At first, you tried to laugh it off. You'd tell her, "I'm busy," or, "It's not really a match," but your words bounced off her like raindrops on glass. She didn't hear the resistance. Or maybe she chose not to. To her, this was a game she had already decided how to play. The pressure started small. Nudges at dinner, reminders in group chats, playful elbow jabs when his name came up. But, gradually, it shifted into something heavier. She arranged group outings and accidentally invited him every time. She dropped you into situations where backing out felt rude, or worse, ungrateful. If you complained, she accused you of being negative, of shutting down opportunities before they had a chance to grow. You found yourself sitting through awkward meals, forced laughter, and conversations that never quite flowed. Chris seemed well-meaning, but you knew you didn't feel that spark. It wasn't his fault. It wasn't anyone's fault. But no matter how many ways you tried to express this, your best friend steamrolled your words with her enthusiasm. The worst part wasn't Chris at all. It was her. The way she acted as though she owned your choices, as though she knew what was best for you more than you did. Each time she made a comment about your future together, or teased you in front of others, you felt your cheeks burn, not with affection, but with frustration. What had once been a friendship rooted in support was starting to feel like a performance you couldn't escape. You weren't just under pressure to date, you were under pressure to play the role she had written for you, smiling on cue, ignoring your discomfort so she could feel like the mastermind pulling the strings. Deep down, you wondered, did she really think she was helping? Or was she just chasing the drama, the thrill of being at the center of a story she had created? Whatever her reasons, the pressure was building, and you could feel it pushing you toward a breaking point you weren't sure how much longer you could avoid. It didn't take long for the discomfort to sink in. What once felt like harmless nudges now weighed on you like a heavy coat you couldn't shrug off. Every interaction with her became tinged with unease, as though you were walking into a trap you already knew was set. One evening she invited you to what she called a casual hangout. You arrived expecting the usual circle of familiar faces, only to find Chris waiting there again, this time with just the two of you and her. She greeted you with exaggerated excitement, clapping her hands like a host revealing a surprise guest. "Look who's here! Isn't this perfect?" The air thickened immediately. Chris gave you an awkward smile, clearly aware of the tension, while you forced yourself to return it. Inside, though, frustration simmered. You hadn't agreed to this. You hadn't even been told. You were just placed here, like a chess piece moved without your consent. Throughout the night, your best friend kept inserting herself, in ways that made it worse, dropping suggestive comments, steering conversations into personal territory, laughing too loudly at things that weren't funny. Each glance she threw your way carried the same message: play along. Don't ruin this. You started to notice the way your body reacted, shoulders tense, jaw clenched, stomach knotted. You weren't enjoying yourself. You were enduring. Every laugh felt forced, Every word measured, and by the time you left, you were drained in a way that had nothing to do with socializing and everything to do with pretending. Back home, lying in the quiet of your room, the anger surfaced fully. You replayed the evening. Her smug smile, the way she ignored every subtle cue you gave her. It wasn't just awkward anymore. It was manipulative. She was pushing you into situations that suited her version of events, not yours. And yet, when you tried to picture confronting her, your chest tightened. This was your best friend. The one you had trusted for years. How do you tell someone like that they've crossed a line without tearing a hole in the very fabric of your bond? You thought about texting her, maybe framing it lightly. Hey, can you not set me up like that anymore? But the words felt too weak for the frustration clawing inside you. And the longer you stared at the blank screen, the more you realized. You were afraid she wouldn't take you seriously. Discomfort had become the new normal, and silence had become your shield. But deep down, you knew that silence wouldn't protect you forever. It was only a matter of time before the cracks in your patience split wide open. The whispers began before you even realized what was happening. It started innocently enough. Mutual friends making sly remarks, little smiles exchanged across the table, questions phrased like jokes. "So, how are things going with Chris?" someone asked one afternoon, the grin on their face suggesting they already thought they knew the answer. You laughed it off, insisting there wasn't anything to tell. But the way they looked at each other told you otherwise. It was clear your best friend had been talking. The gossip spread quickly, like ink bleeding through paper. Friends you hadn't seen in weeks suddenly teased you about your new romance. Even people outside your immediate circle started asking questions, their curiosity fueled by a narrative you hadn't agreed to, but were now trapped in. The worst part was how powerless you felt. No matter what you said, the story had already taken on a life of its own. Denials sounded like deflections. Protests made you seem defensive. And each time you opened your mouth to explain, you could almost hear your best friend's voice echoing in their heads, painting you as someone coyly hiding a blossoming love story. You confronted her once, in a quiet moment between errands. "Are you telling people I'm dating him?" you asked, trying to keep your voice even. She shrugged, as if it were nothing. "I might have mentioned you two hit it off. Why? Isn't it better if people know? Builds excitement." Her casual tone cut deeper than any direct admission could have. To her, this wasn't betrayal. It was entertainment. A subplot in the ongoing drama of your social group. To you, it was a violation, a theft of your voice, your privacy, your right to decide what parts of your life were shared and what parts weren't. The gossip didn't stop. If anything, it grew. You noticed Chris becoming more self-conscious too, caught between trying to correct the rumors and not wanting to seem rude. The two of you exchanged awkward glances at group gatherings, silently acknowledging that neither of you had signed up for this. Meanwhile, your best friend thrived in the spotlight, relishing the role of matchmaker. She basked in the laughter, the teasing, the way everyone turned to her for updates. Each time she winked at you across the room, it felt less like camaraderie and more like control. What once had been a friendship built on trust was now being twisted into a stage, and you were the unwilling star of a show you hadn't auditioned for. The drama was no longer just between you and her, it was public now, and it was closing in fast. The breaking point arrived on a Saturday night, at what was supposed to be a small get-together. You'd already been dreading it, knowing your best friend had hinted that Chris would be there. You walked in braced for awkwardness, but you weren't prepared for what actually happened. Halfway through the evening, after too many glasses of wine had loosened everyone's tongues, she decided to make her move. With the whole group gathered in the living room, she clapped her hands dramatically. "All right, everyone," she announced, grinning wide. "We all know why these two keep showing up together. Let's just call it what it is. Our favorite new couple." The room erupted in cheers, laughter, playful teasing. People whistled, clapped, even shouted jokes you couldn't fully process over the roar in your ears. Chris' face turned crimson, his mouth opening as if to object, but the noise drowned him out. And you, frozen, humiliated, sat in the middle of it all, your heart pounding, your throat dry. You tried to laugh it off, but the sound caught in your chest. The walls seemed to close in, every pair of eyes on you, every voice pushing you deeper into a story that wasn't yours. And there she was, your best friend, standing with her arms crossed, smiling proudly, as if she'd just pulled off the world's greatest prank. Something inside you snapped. Enough, you said, louder than you intended. The room fell silent. Everyone turned toward you, the weight of their stares pressing down. This isn't funny. I never agreed to this. Stop. Your voice shook, but the words hung heavy in the air. For a moment, no one spoke. Then nervous laughter bubbled up from the edges of the group, people glancing between you and her, unsure of what to do. Your best friend's smile faltered, then hardened into something else. Defensiveness, maybe even anger. Wow, she said, her tone sharp. I was just trying to help you. You don't have to be so dramatic. And but you were done playing along. The weeks of discomfort, the whispers, the setups, the jokes, it all boiled over in that moment. Helping me, you snapped. You've been using me, for attention, for entertainment. This isn't about me. It's about you. The silence that followed was thick, suffocating. Chris stared at the floor. Your friends shifted uncomfortably, their expressions caught between sympathy and embarrassment. And your best friend, your once trusted confidant, looked at you not with understanding, but with wounded pride, as though you had betrayed her, simply by refusing to play along. The argument had begun, and there was no taking it back. After that night, nothing was the same. The room had gone quiet after your outburst, but the echo of it lingered long after the gathering ended. Friends avoided eye contact as they left, murmuring awkward goodbyes. Chris gave you a sympathetic nod before slipping out, clearly relieved to escape the spotlight he'd never wanted. But the deepest wound was with her. Your best friend didn't speak to you as everyone filtered away. She busied herself with clearing glasses, jaw tight, refusing to look at you. When you finally approached, she muttered, "You didn't have to humiliate me in front of everyone," and turned her back. Humiliate her. The words stuck in your chest like thorns. Had she really convinced herself that she was the victim here? That your frustration, your humiliation, your boundaries broken again and again, somehow paled compared to the embarrassment of being called out? The days that followed were filled with silence, punctuated by short, clipped texts when communication was unavoidable. Group chats became a minefield. Some friends sided with you, others with her, and still others tried to remain neutral, though their avoidance spoke louder than their words. The circle you had once relied on for comfort now felt fractured, everyone tiptoeing around the fallout. For the first time in years, you didn't feel like you had a safe place with her. Every memory you replayed, late-night talks, shared secrets, inside jokes, was now shadowed by the knowledge that she had twisted your trust into entertainment. You found yourself questioning everything. Was she always like this? Was the drama always more important to her than your feelings, and you just hadn't seen it? Or had something shifted along the way, transforming your friend into someone who valued attention over loyalty? The loneliness was sharp. You hadn't just lost comfort. You had lost a version of yourself that existed only in her presence. The you who could laugh without explanation, cry without fear of judgment. Without that bond, you felt like a puzzle missing a corner piece, technically whole, but visibly incomplete. And yet, beneath the pain, a quiet clarity began to form. You realized you couldn't go back to the way things were, not unless she acknowledged what she had done, not unless she valued your boundaries as much as her need for control. The fracture had become a chasm, and for the first time, you doubted whether it could ever be repaired. In the quiet days that followed, you found yourself replaying the entire arc of your friendship. Every shared laugh, every whispered secret, every time you leaned on her, or she leaned on you, was now tinged with doubt. You asked yourself questions you didn't want the answers to. Was she really listening all those nights when you poured out your heart? Or was she collecting material to spin into stories later? Had she always been this hungry for attention, this eager to stand in the spotlight, while you stood quietly in the background? You wanted to believe the best of her. After all, years of friendship can't just dissolve without a fight. But each time you tried to rationalize her behavior, you hit the same wall. She had taken your trust and twisted it, not once, but again and again, even after you showed her how much it hurt. Reflection became your constant companion. On long walks, you turned the situation over in your head like a stone in your hand, searching for smooth edges, but finding only sharp corners. You thought about the importance of boundaries, something you had never really had to enforce with her before. With other people, yes. With colleagues, with acquaintances, with casual friends. But with her, you had assumed boundaries were unnecessary. You thought she knew you well enough to respect them without you having to say a word. Now you knew better. You began to notice patterns, little things that once seemed harmless. The way she always had to tell the loudest story at a party. The way she sometimes shared details you'd told her in confidence, because it was too funny not to. You realized that this wasn't new. It was simply the first time her need for drama had collided so painfully with your life. And as painful as it was, the clarity was almost freeing. It wasn't that you were broken, or difficult, or ungrateful, as her sharp words had implied. It was that your friendship had slipped out of balance, tipping too far toward her wants and too far away from your needs. Late one night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, you whispered the truth out loud for the first time. I deserve better than this. The words felt strange, heavy in your mouth, but once spoken, they lingered in the room like a promise. You still didn't know what you were going to do, whether to confront her again, whether to step back quietly, whether to let the bond dissolve on its own. But for the first time in weeks, you felt something stronger than anger or sadness. You felt resolve. The choice didn't come easily. You spent days weighing it, your heart and mind tugging in different directions. Part of you wanted to believe in forgiveness, to cling to the hope that years of friendship could outweigh weeks of betrayal. The other part whispered that forgiveness without change was just permission to be hurt again. One evening, after dodging yet another message in the group chat that made you feel like an outsider, you sat down and wrote 2 lists. On the left, everything she had brought into your life, support during breakups, laughter during late nights, a sense of belonging. On the right, the pain she had caused recently, the humiliation, the gossip, the manipulation, the disregard for your boundaries. The right-hand list was longer. Still, the decision wasn't simple. You imagined confronting her again, spelling it all out clearly this time. How she had pushed you, embarrassed you, disregarded your feelings. Maybe she would finally understand. Maybe she would apologize sincerely and mean it. The thought was tempting, the way a gambler is tempted by one more spin of the wheel. But you also imagined the other outcome, the more likely one. That she would deflect, laugh it off, accuse you of overreacting. That she would turn the tables until you were the villain in her story. And you realized you couldn't afford to gamble your peace anymore. So, you made your choice. You didn't cut her off in a burst of anger or announce it to the group. Instead, you began the slow work of stepping back. You stopped answering her calls immediately. You excused yourself from gatherings you knew she had orchestrated. When you did see her, you kept the conversations surface level, no longer offering her the raw pieces of yourself she had once wielded so carelessly. The distance grew quietly, almost invisibly. To outsiders, It might have looked like you were just busy, caught up in life. But to you, it was deliberate. A reclamation of space, of dignity, of control. And though it hurt, though there were nights you stared at old photos and felt a pang of longing, you also noticed something else, blooming in the silence she left behind. A sense of calm, a sense of freedom, a reminder that you could survive without her constant presence, and maybe even thrive. The choice hadn't been easy, but deep down you knew it was the right one. Time has a way of softening sharp edges, but it doesn't erase them. Months later, when you looked back on the whirlwind your best friend had dragged you into, the pain wasn't as raw, but the lessons remained etched deep. You realized that trust, no matter how long it's been built, can crumble in an instant if it isn't treated with care. That boundaries aren't optional in friendships, they're essential. And that anyone, even someone you've loved like family, can cross those lines if you don't speak up. It wasn't just about Chris. He had been a bystander, caught in the crossfire of someone else's need for drama. The real story was about her. How she had used your life as entertainment, your discomfort as fuel, your silence as permission. And how you had finally learned to say no. The absence of her in your life was strange at first. There were moments you reached for your phone instinctively, wanting to share a story, a joke, a bad day. But, with each hesitation, you reminded yourself why you had stepped back. Friendships are supposed to lift you, not bury you under expectations you never agreed to. And slowly, you filled the space she left behind. Other friends stepped in, quieter but kinder, more willing to listen than to broadcast. You rediscovered the joy of privacy, of keeping parts of your life sacred and untouched by gossip. Most of all, you found strength in yourself, the ability to set boundaries and keep them, even when it hurt. Looking back, you didn't hate her. Hate was too heavy to carry. Instead, you felt a bittersweet gratitude. She had shown you the cost of ignoring your own discomfort, the danger of letting loyalty blind you to disrespect. And in that painful lesson, she had given you something unexpected, clarity. So when you thought of her now, you didn't dwell on the betrayal or the drama. You remembered the laughter, yes, but you also remembered the sting. And you held both truths at once, letting them guide you forward. Because in the end, the story wasn't just about losing a friend. It was about finding yourself.